Ever walked into a room full of important people and felt completely invisible? Have you ever felt those heavy stares, judging your every move, every detail about you? The truth is, thousands of people are living that reality right now. Ignored because they don't hold a prestigious title, because they don't wear expensive clothes, or simply because they're invisible in the eyes of those who think they're superior. But here's something you may not want to hear. Sometimes, the greatest revolutions come from those no one expects anything from. Just imagine. Today she goes unnoticed while cleaning the meeting room. Tomorrow, she walks through that same door as CEO. Are you ready to deal with a twist like that in your life too? It was just another meeting room, filled with tight ties and fake laughs that felt more like a contest of who had the most power. Clara entered wearing a simple uniform, bucket in hand, and the posture of someone who knew the value of her own sweat. But in that room, respect was scarce, and glances were as sharp as blades. Nasty remarks filled the air, people with no future, they said, as if they knew the destiny of someone they didn't even greet. If only they knew how many stories live hidden behind a broom. As she cleaned every corner, Clara listened in silence. Not because she was weak, but because she had learned early on that the world listens better when the noise comes from results. They laughed loudly, but failed to see that before them stood a woman full of plans, scars, and a resume sharper than the framed diplomas on the walls. Arrogance was treated like virtue, and empathy like weakness. The irony? Many of those who underestimate others end up tripping over their own vanity. It's easy to ignore the one cleaning the floor when you're too busy scrubbing your own conscience with excuses. Those executives talked numbers, profits, strategies, but forgot that no company grows by ignoring the ones holding it up behind the scenes. And Clara, Clara, knew every inch of that room, not just from the dust. She knew the stories of humiliation, of resistance, and most of all, of those who learned to win in silence. But her silence wouldn't last forever. Behind her seemingly simple routine, Clara nurtured something rare, silent discipline. While she scrubbed floors by day, at night she dove into books, spreadsheets, management theories, and market studies. It was like watering a seed no one could see, but she knew exactly what she was planting. How many of us have talents locked away just because our current setting doesn't match our potential? Amid the cleaning, she also scrubbed away limiting beliefs that whispered, "This isn't for you." Clara earned her business degree quietly, without spotlight. She worked behind the scenes of startups that now grace magazine covers. And yet, life pushed her away from the offices for a time. Personal struggles, losses, and mounting bills led her to accept a cleaning job, not out of lack of ability, but out of courage. Many are ashamed to start over from the bottom, but that's where the most transformative stories are born. Those who learn to reinvent themselves in chaos can master any setting. She studied using donated handouts, online lectures, and books like Blue Ocean Strategy and Good to Great. She always jotted ideas in an old notebook, the same one she carried on her cleaning cart. There was no glamour, but there was purpose. Every night of studying was a step toward a future she quietly built while the world judged her by her appearance. But the next page of her story was about to turn, and no one had a clue about the impact she would make. The company was submerged in a quiet crisis, the kind that doesn't show up in reports but echoes in cold hallways and ego-driven meetings. Leadership, lost in status games, didn't notice the floor crumbling beneath them. Then the news broke. An anonymous investor had bought everything. Whispers began. Who would be the new CEO? Guesses floated in hasty murmurs, while the real stories were ignored by the suit-wearing speculators. On the big day, expectations were clear. A foreign name, someone with a Harvard MBA and a glowing resume. The room was prepared, speeches rehearsed, fake smiles exchanged. The door opened. Steady heels, a sober dress, a calm gaze. It was Clara, the same woman who, just days earlier, had been scrubbing that very floor beneath their laughter. Silence fell, and for the first time, the discomfort belonged to the ones in suits. No one understood at first, but one look into her eyes made it clear. Clara wasn't there by accident, nor for revenge. She was there by merit, by strategy, and by vision. That whole power charade collapsed in an instant. And at that exact moment, a new chapter began, not just for the company, but for all the stories yet to be rewritten under her leadership. And this chapter, began with a sentence no one would ever forget. Clara took a deep breath before speaking. In that same room where she'd once been ignored, she was now the center of attention, but ego didn't guide her. With the serenity of someone who'd learned more by listening than shouting, she began by recalling the cruel remarks she had once overheard. People with no future, they had said. And there she was, proving that some stories just need time and resilience to bloom. Her tone wasn't confrontational, but conscious. Clara calmly but firmly exposed how that silent culture of disdain and vanity choked productivity, internal morale, and innovation. She spoke of numbers, people, dreams shoved into drawers by the fear of being invisible. And with practical examples, she showed how companies that ignore the small people sink, while those that listen thrive. She referenced Patagonia, Natura, companies that listen to their employees and change the game. In closing, she announced deep changes in leadership. Tough days were ahead, she warned, but absolutely necessary. Here, there will be no more room for those who rise by stepping on others. She was direct, human, and strategic. For the first time, many in the room saw themselves in the mirror and didn't like the reflection. But like every great story, this one wasn't just here to provoke. It had just begun to transform. In her first few months as CEO, Clara did what many considered unproductive. She listened to those who had never had a voice. She visited the cafeteria, spoke to security guards, looked cleaning ladies in the eyes. She called every professional by name, because names matter and dignity does too. She announced a program to value the invisible, those who sustain companies in silence, people with stories too rich to keep being ignored. The program included ongoing education, career plans, and participation in internal decisions. Previously ignored employees could now propose improvements, suggest ideas, grow. A cafeteria worker suggested a more efficient snack distribution system, saving 18,000 Brazilian reals in a quarter. A security guard redesigned the entrance flow, reducing wait times by 40%. Clara proved through action that recognizing the invisible was an investment, not charity. The impact was immediate: lower turnover, higher productivity, better work environment. The company became a case study on LinkedIn, in business magazines, and, most importantly, in the hearts of its own employees. When people feel seen, they grow. And where there is human growth, there is room for grand stories, but not everyone was ready for this change, and resistance soon showed its face. Not everyone applauded Clara's changes. Martin, one of the senior executives, frowned from day one. He thought it was all too emotional, not pragmatic enough, as if respect were a waste and empathy a weakness. He tried to undermine her in meetings, made snide remarks in side conversations, and planted doubts through corporate emails. But Clara stood firm. She knew some stories must be faced with data, not shouting. She gathered reports, presented charts, comparisons, internal feedback, and case studies of companies that thrived by humanizing leadership. She showed that innovation doesn't come from fear, but from engagement. She cited Salesforce, which grew by investing in inclusion. She laid out clear results: reduced turnover, increased goal achievement, soaring engagement. Martin had no arguments, and for the first time, fell silent without sarcasm. That resistance was really just fear disguised as criticism. Fear of losing privilege, of stepping out of the comfort zone, of watching a model collapse where a few command and many obey in silence. Clara didn't just come to lead. She came to teach a new way of seeing value. Because companies are made of people, and where there are people, there are stories, and where stories are nurtured, there's a future. But not everyone was ready to accept this truth. During a full staff meeting, Clara asked for silence. Not to assert authority, but to open her heart. With a firm voice and moist eyes, she shared something no one knew. The man she had shared her life with, her husband, had also been a janitor. A quiet dreamer who believed that one day, humble people would have a seat at the table, not just at the bottom of the org chart. And it was for him, and for so many similar stories, that she returned. She told them how he worked double shifts to pay for her prep courses, how he cheered every small victory, even though he'd never had one himself. She said he passed away too soon, victim of an accident, carrying the dream of seeing invisible workers treated with dignity. Clara couldn't hold back her tears, and neither could many others. Because it wasn't just the CEO speaking. It was the soul of thousands of silenced voices finally being heard. That's when everyone understood. Clara's position was symbolic, yes, but also a turning point. A tribute, a rescue, a promise fulfilled. Every policy she implemented, every decision she made carried more than technique. It carried purpose. And that purpose began to change not just that company's destiny, but the fate of many stories yet to come. Clara knew real power isn't imposed, it's exercised with responsibility. That's why she didn't come swinging or seeking revenge. She invited each executive for a one-on-one conversation. She offered opportunities for re-education, mentorship, and participation in building a new company culture. She said clearly, "You can stay, but you can't stay the same." It was time to rewrite stories or leave the page. Some accepted the challenge with humility. Others, like Martin, tried to keep playing the ego game. Clara didn't hesitate. With respect but firmness, she let him go. Not out of spite, but out of alignment. There was no more room for leaders who led only by title, not by character. The company's culture needed people with vision, not vanity. And that takes courage, both to stay and to let go. She made it clear, this wasn't about punishment, but about protecting what was being born. Offering a second chance is noble, but insisting on keeping someone who sabotages the collective is irresponsible. The company was now a living organism, and every toxic cell must eventually be removed. It was a tough process, but necessary. And only then was the soil fertile enough for a new kind of growth. One that comes from the inside out, nourished by real, transformative stories. With the changes in place, the company started to breathe differently. The hallways gained color, meetings flowed with respect, and employees walked with heads held high. It was no longer just about goals, it was about purpose. And, curiously, when people were put at the center, the numbers started rising. The stories that had been stifled now inspired innovation, engagement, and real results. Productivity increased, not out of fear of layoffs or toxic pressure, but because people wanted to be there. They wanted to contribute, grow, transform. It became normal to see improvement suggestions coming from operational teams and cross-functional meetings where everyone had a voice. Clara brought a culture similar to that of Magazine Luisa, leadership with care and strategy with listening. A place where stories found space and voice. The company became a standout at events, appeared on best workplace rankings, and attracted talent that had once overlooked it. But more than status, it gained a soul. And that soul was made of ordinary people, like Clara, who didn't give up when everything seemed lost. Now, the same meeting room where they once laughed at her served as the stage for grand decisions rooted in empathy, strategy, and vision. And it was there that Clara wrote one final message, one that would echo for a long time. On the meeting room wall, Clara took a marker and calmly wrote something no one expected. It wasn't a goal, nor a quote from a famous author. It was a simple yet powerful truth. Never underestimate those who walk in silence. Sometimes, the quietest steps are the ones holding up the greatest empires. Absolute silence. For the first time, everyone there understood that respect isn't demanded. It's built with real stories. The sentence stayed on the wall, visible at every meeting that followed. It became a mantra of the new leadership, a daily reminder that no one should be judged by appearance, and that talent often hides where no one dares to look. Clara didn't just teach with words, she taught by example. And that kind of leadership isn't learned in business school. It's learned through life, empathy, and the courage to honor one's roots. Every great company should have someone with a story like hers at the helm. More than a CEO, Clara became a symbol of an era where humanity and strategy walk side by side. She showed that it's not about climbing alone, but about lifting others as you rise, especially those who never had the chance. Every step she took was a message. I've been on the ground too, but I didn't stay there. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what's missing in many companies today. Leaders who've known the ground before trying to own the top. Now tell me, how many Claras have you ignored in your life without realizing it? How many amazing stories may have passed you by while you didn't even look up? Maybe it's time to change the way you see the world, and especially the people around you. Are you treating those who serve you daily with respect? And what if that person turns out to be the next CEO? Or worse, the mirror of your own arrogance? Don't wait to lose to learn. Start valuing those around you now, because the greatest plot twists don't send warnings. And if you want to keep learning how to see beyond the surface, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Here, we share stories that don't just inspire, they transform.